Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to ConspiracyCon 2002 and our final function of the weekend. This is the panel discussion. Most of our speakers, including our special guest Jordan Maxwell, have agreed to remain for questions and answers from you, our audience, for a full 2 hours. I mentioned this before, but I will say it again. For the record, please keep your comments brief and your questions brief, and I will ask the same of the speakers of their answers. Without any further ado, let me go ahead and I will just name off our panel, and then you can go ahead and line up questions right over there by the microphone. We have closest to me, starting Anthony J. Hilder, Eustace Mullins, Walter Boart, Jordan Maxwell, Colonel Boegreitz, Ted L. Gunderson, Norio Hayakawa, and finally Eric John Phelps are all here to join us. So I urge you, if you have any questions, to please go ahead and go to the microphone. This is your opportunity. After all the lectures have been given, after all that has been said and done, please feel free. Go ahead.
How many Iraqis did we kill in the Gulf War?
Well, it'd be very interesting to find out what official figures are, but the estimates are about 400,000, which most of them were non-National Guardsmen. You know, most of them were non-combatants. But it was far more, I think, than was necessary. But it certainly made the point.
How many of the combatants would you say we killed?
Oh, probably a fraction of that. You know, probably in the tens of thousands of both the Army and Saddam Hussein's personal guard.
Right. So did the 400,000 die within the 100 hours that you spoke of, or are you speaking of afterwards also?
I think cumulative, but mainly I think the major move that was made with a lot of the bombing that went on. We were, in America, we were amused, watching smart bombs strike bridges and one thing and the other, and of course these had civilians. I think when you take a look at what's happened to Americans as a result of our war over there, and the Desert Storm as opposed to Desert Shield, that they suffer the same kind of problems that we do.
Yeah. Okay, so then some of that 400,000 died as of the effects after the 100 hours, then you're saying?
The figures I'm hearing are that it's kind of like after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, you add up, the casualties, but it appears to be a number of 400,000 that lost their lives as a result of, in other words, criminally, we could be charged with aiding and abetting, even though it may not have been a direct result, but indirect result of that war.
Yeah, yeah.
100-hour war.
All right, thank you.
At the conference here, we've heard a couple different theses about who's behind this, whether it's the Jesuits, the Illuminati, the bankers, the Bilderbergers. Some group supposedly is masterminding this whole scheme over multiple generations, maintaining a coherence on this grand conspiracy, which to me just is amazing that a bureaucracy can be that competent over that many generations, being somewhat familiar with bureaucracy myself and some of the smaller organizations. That's just really amazing to believe. So what I would be interested in is see a discussion among the members of the panel about who, if anyone, is behind this, or is it sufficient to regard it as mostly incompetent, and occasionally people get in there and try to grab a little more, like Bo's numbers with the put options. I could believe that. One guy tries to make a little money on the side. That makes sense to me. But multiple generations being able to coherently keep something like this together is just really amazing.
Well, if you will, allow me to be the first to answer this. The Vatican has succeeded in staying a part of the power structure in Europe for some 1,600 years. And there's an enormous amount of power, bloodshed, violence that has been strewn all over the world. by and European forces. Europe has dominated the world for at least 1,600 years, and the Vatican has dominated Europe for some 1,600 years. When you see the monstrosity that is built up in Europe by the Vatican, the banking families, the Vatican associated banking families, all one has to do to get a flavor of this is to get the movie Godfather 3. The third in the series of Godfather shows you the direct connection between the mafia, organized crime, and the Vatican. Going a step further, you've got to understand that P2, Propaganda Due Lodge of Freemasonry out of Italy, has been instrumental in right-wing fascist movements throughout the world. So the Vatican has always maintained its position in world affairs over 1,600 years. So if there's any organization in the world that is very highly educated and technically prepared to deal with world events, I think the Vatican is a good start. It's not the only one, but I do believe that there is a very big truth in the Jesuits' influence on world affairs. That I'm totally convinced of. And of course, out of Europe has come the mafiosi, the gangsters, the underworld crime, and the Vatican is up to its neck involved in all of it. 1,600 years. That's a real organization.
Okay, still. Okay, here we go. The mafia would be a good thing, dear. The girl was just standing up, but in answer to his question, I would far prefer the mafia to be running this country than the gang that's in there right now. The White House is run like Murder Incorporated, and this Cassius cartel has been working for literally 200 plus years, since the formation of the order and sect of the Illuminati. They control it all. Our commerce, our currency. This is a Cassius cartel. It's an evilarchy, and they are Luciferian in nature. If Christianity can exist for 2,000 years, certainly an evilarchy, a group dedicated to bringing about a Luciferian oligarchy, could exist in the year 2002. In fact, it does. Go ahead.
It's live? Okay, good. I retired, as you all know, in '79, came out, worked the McDonald case. The light bulb went on when I realized evidence lost, stolen, destroyed, altered, etc., etc. Obtained a confession from Alina Stokely, the girl in the floppy hat, who said that he didn't commit the crimes. Dr. McDonald did not commit the crimes. They were committed by my satanic cult group. I went public with the information. I obtained the confession on October 25, 1980. A number of TV shows, radio talk shows, people came out of the woodwork from all parts of the country telling me about the satanic cult movement in this country, United States. People on the East Coast, West Coast, South, and so on and so forth. Same basic story. And they not only told me about the cults, but they told me about the inner workings of the cults. Not a lot of detail, but enough that I could piece it together. And I'm saying, how could somebody from Maine know and furnish the same information as somebody from Southern California? As a result of that, of course, then I obtained a copy later on of Pawns in the Game, and this book, Pawns in the Game, which I sold out of on this conference, really explained what has happened in the last 240 or 50 years. And that is this, that in 1773, Adam Weishaupt, a Bavarian, former priest, was commissioned to obtain or come up with the 25 with goals to take over the world. And on May the 1st, 1776, he announced the 25 goals. The goals are unbelievable if you look at them one by one and then analyze what's happened today. corrupt the youth through sex and drugs, control the press, create an incident, and then come in and act as the saviors, like the Reichstag, and we saw this in Oklahoma City. So then, not only did I, of course, research the Illuminati and come up with the answer there, but these people kept calling me from around the country. They've been calling me now for 22 years. And based on the information that's been furnished to me, this evil element has infiltrated virtually every level of society. Okay, it's in the government. They've gone out of their way, of course, to infiltrate in city, county, state, and the federal government. It's in the banking system. It's in the courts. It's in the prosecutors, the attorneys, doctors. It's mind-boggling. It's unbelievable. I have been asked how many. By the way, this dovetails, the satanic cult movement dovetails into, as part of the Illuminati, dovetails into drugs, prostitution, homosexuality, the whole 9 yards. And I've been asked on a number of occasions, how many are there in the United States, just say walking the streets? And I say that there's close to 4 million, if not 4 million, practicing Satanists in America today. That's 1.5% of the population. I reached these figures through 3 different means. Number one, a confidential source in the South Bay area, Los Angeles, population 200,000, says there's about 3,000 members in that area. That's where the Manhattan Beach McMartin case took place. Lincoln, Nebraska, 200,000 population. Another source told me about 3,000 members there. Iowa City, Iowa, another source told me about 1,500, and Iowa City's a population of 100,000. So if you project those figures, that's what I see as the strength and the number of individuals who are involved in this movement at the, say, basically at the street level, and also in controlling positions in various industries. So it is a serious problem. What we're going to do about it, I don't know. The best we can do is just expose it and try to wake up America. It dovetails into the banking system, as Eustace will tell you, I'm sure. And it's even in the military. As Bo mentioned to me, I think just yesterday, the military declared Satanism a legitimate religion, and they can practice. So what year was that, Bo?
It was 1976. It was the year I changed on my dog tag my religion to Special Forces. And the Inspector General was very chagrined because he came and said, Bo, you're the commander of Special Forces. We cannot gig you. We don't want to. You've got to change your dog tag. And I said, look, if you can put Satanism as your religion, as an official Army recognized religion, don't tell me I can't have Special Forces as my religion. And so the troops heard about it, and they all changed their religion to Special Forces too.
I'll try to cut the rest of the answer as short as possible. Do I think that the FBI and the CIA, I'm not talking about the whole group. There's a lot of good people in both agencies. But do I think that they're incompetent? No. Do I think they've been infiltrated? Yes. And in the FBI in particular, I'll tell you what happened here when Reagan was president. They were having difficulty getting agents on the street to advance to the supervisory level. Of course, that's a very important position. And because the fund is on the street, it's not sitting behind a desk all day pushing paper. So they sent a memo out, this is what I've been told by some of my friends, to the street agents, anybody that wants to be promoted, submit your resume and let's go from there. Well, as a result, I think that what they did is the good agents stayed on the streets, and the other agents, the Illuminati members, if you want to call them that, not all of them, of course, advanced to the supervisory level. On one occasion here during the Atlanta, Georgia Olympics, there was a spokesperson on for the FBI on national television in connection with the bombing that took place down there, and I had a call from an adult survivor. Adult survivor, somebody that's born into the movement, the cults, is raised there, gets out, tries to go straight and stay away from it. But I had a call from an adult survivor and said, this person told me, a lady, woman, that she recognized that FBI spokesman as having attended satanic meetings in the past. So I'm saying that, hey, they've had 230 some years to put this together. They're advancing. I know of one adult survivor who was a recruiter and a trainer. She was training other people in San Diego area to recruit survivors. And she was recruiting 26 people at a time, other people, teaching them how to recruit in the satanic movement. Very serious problem. So I'm sorry I couldn't make it any shorter than that.
Listening? Hi. Actually, I have a question. If anybody else has questions, please go ahead and go up to the microphone. Just a quick question. I've heard critics say that the term Illuminati is some sort of vague generality for some of these secret groups, and that it's a mask or just a generality. How would you respond to that? And a quick comment. I had a conversation with Jordan about this at the previous conspiracy conference, that the most dangerous secret society is the one that we don't know about. But we keep hearing about this elusive Illuminati. Yes, the symbol is there on the dollar bill. Can anybody respond to that?
Well, let me try something. Today I basically talked about what we know about physical reality. But right now, I think in response to that gentleman's question, the bottom line is who is on top of top. And basically, we're going to what is Illuminati? And unfortunately, there's no headquarters, physical headquarters for the Illuminati office. We don't know. There is, I believe, an invisible force that is above groups like Bilderberg's groups, above groups like Trilateral Commission and so on. Let's say that I believe that there is an invisible force that we don't know nothing about. And they are not, I don't think they are aliens, but I believe that they are some kind of a unseen force that is directing the general movement of the world to certain directions. And the only term I can say is that it's basically back to the religionistic interpretation that there is in this world that coexists an invisible force or dark force, or ultimately I believe it's Satan. This might antagonize a few people, but that's my personal belief, that it is a conspiracy from the very beginning, with the rebellion in the cosmos against the Creator, and that is the beginning of all conspiracy, leading us up into the final confrontation. Well, that's my interpretation.
Microphone?
You got a micro? Okay. I'm going to add to that. If we went to 58 East 68th Street in New York City at the Council on Foreign Relations, if we went to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and the city within the city in London, I believe that you might find out where the watering hole for the big boys lies.
I believe that that the man that's in charge is the Jesuit general, Peter Hans Kolvenbach. Peter Hans Kolvenbach commands his curia outside of Vatican walls, that his assistants are the ones who advise him, and that those assistants are advised by their subordinate provincials throughout the world. The Illuminati was started by a Jesuit priest who never left the order, and it was purpose to punish the monarchs of Europe and the Pope himself for their suppression, the suppression of the Jesuit order in 1773. The Council on Foreign Relations, I believe, is controlled by the Archbishop of New York, and he is advised by the Jesuits at Fordham, particularly Joseph A. O'Hare, the president of Fordham, and also Cardinal Avery Dulles, who is the nephew of John Foster Dulles.
Go ahead.
Hi. Actually, I got two questions. One kind of related to what Norio just got on, and is that if any of you think there's actually a world king, per se, and that there's one person in charge that pulls all the strings at the very top of the pyramid, how there would be one person, whether it's a alien, reptilian, who knows. But or if it's actually from that bloodline, and if it's somebody that we can actually see, like the Rockefellers, or from somebody, or if it's actually hidden several layers up. That's the first question. And then the second question would probably direct to Jordan, Anthony, and Bo, is if, given what's happened since September 11th and all of the FBI warnings and all of the, they're going to blow up the bridges and they're going to blow up, banks in New York City, do any of you have any thoughts on what's going to be coming next? Because now we're in this heightened state of alert, and 4th of July is supposed to be the next big day. If any of you have any insight on what might be in store for us in the future, it's a vague question, but that's pretty much the two, the World King and the 9/11.
Well, I have only one thing to say. There was a motion picture, television made for TV, that you might be able to find. It was done about 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago. It was called Terror in the Streets. You can look for it at Blockbuster or whatever, any of these outlets. I haven't done a whole lot of research on trying to find it, but I remember it well because I watched it 2 or 3 times. Terror in the Streets. And the story was about how the President of the United States, with many of his financial backers, decided to take over in a military-type coup the whole entire superstructure of this country. And what they did in the movie, Terror in the Streets, is they blew up buildings. They would go in and blow up some buildings, and all the chaos and anarchy that followed, and then the president would go on and talk about how we have to protect the fatherland and we've got to protect this country, and therefore we have to do this or that and make new laws. That's 25, 30 years ago, Terror in the Streets. See if you can find it and rent it. Hollywood does 3 things. They tell you what they've already done, what they're doing now, and what they're getting ready to do. Okay?
Yeah.
I'd like to hear what Eustace has to say, because he wrote the book on a New World Order. When you look at the Curse of Canaan and you see how they can have a meeting at Jekyll Island, they can come up with something that works. It is maybe a cog in the overall gearing of this New World Order, but Eustace is a national treasure. He's 79 years young, and I'm going to start taking the same pills that he's taking because I want to look as good as he does next year. But I think, Eustace, you've got to have some good insight on this.
Well, for 50 years, people have asked me, who is running the show? Who is the secret committee? And I think they keep themselves pretty well hidden, and that's why they give us such ostentatious buffoons like W. and Bill Clinton, because they're so far removed from people of power that they're not doing anything, and it doesn't give you any indication of the type of person who is running the show.
A cheap movie, $5 will buy you a movie at Walmart, They Live. It's a Class B movie, but boy, isn't it the truth.
Yeah.
While he's talking about Hollywood, Hollywood obviously is an instrument of this evilarchy. They do the bidding for the banksters, and if I would describe Hollywood, it would have to be the cancer on the hemorrhoid of the ass of the whore of America.
So let me also add, now probably a lot of you have heard me say this, but for those who haven't, that the old ancient Phoenician Canaanite religion with the Phoenicians, who were a great seafaring people, went all around the Mediterranean and built up a huge banking, trading network, and this is many thousands of years ago. They ended up, the Phoenicians went through the Straits of Gibraltar and north into what we today know as Northern Europe. And with them, they brought their Phoenician Canaanite religion, which came to be known today as the old Celtic Druids. And one of the Druidic symbols that has been used in Northern Europe and especially in America is the magic wand. The magicians use magic wands. Magi, magician, and magic wands, the reference works will tell you, have always been made out of the wood of a holly tree. They're made out of Hollywood. Okay? And that's why you have the name of the city, Hollywood. Consequently, when you understand that there is a legitimate, de jure, and real magical system that's based on some very ancient Canaanite, Phoenician Canaanite blood ritual, all kinds of strange religious systems in operation, and that's how I believe the people who are in real power maintain their power, because they've made a pact with an occult force that operates on this earth.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Microphone? Hello? Microphone?
And with regard to Hollywood, I say in my book that Hollywood is the Jesuit theater, and that they're performing Jesuit drama.
To ask Eustace a question. This hierarchy, this hidden hierarchy that we have, I've tried to research and locate a headquarters for this element. It would be nice if we knew where that was, and also how often they meet and where they meet. Do you have any information on that?
Well, for quite a few years, I believed that the headquarters was the office of N.M. Rothschild in London. And I still think that they do have a special office somewhere, but it's these people. Now, there is also, behind the scenes, a demonic force, whether it's extraterrestrial, but it's definitely a demonic, anti-human operation. And that's why I say I've never been able to get I've never seen any artist rendering or imagining of this force, because apparently it's something so horrible we can't even conceive of it.
It's interesting, too, that in the Bible, the Apostle Paul uses an interesting term when he says that we have a fight not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and the forces of darkness. He uses the term in Greek, cosmokratoros. Cosmokratoros, or rulers of this world darkness. Cosmos is the Greek word that gives us cosmos for the world. Kratoros is where we get like democrat, plutocrat leaders or rulers. Cosmokratoros, the Apostle Paul said in the New Testament, are those leaders who are the gods of darkness. And I am telling you that this is exactly what we have. We have people who are proficient in making sure you do not see what they're doing. They are not stupid. They're not ill-informed, but they're keeping you ill-informed. And in that vein, it's also interesting that Jesus made an interesting statement in the Bible that said, if you say that you are in the truth, if you say that you are in the light, but in fact you are in the dark, then how dark your light really is, implying that if you think you are in the light, and in fact you have been deceived into thinking what you have is the truth and the light, then you are really in the dark, implying that there is a profound wisdom operating on this earth that will present itself as a light, present itself as wisdom, intelligent, but you have no idea in the world how dark this stuff really is. When you get into child sacrifice, bloodletting, the mafiosi gangster element, the distribution of drugs, the selling of humans, you have no idea how dark these people who would present themselves as workers of light really are. So I think that what we're dealing with here are some very powerful, and I choose to believe, probably other world entities, because I can't see regular normal humans getting themselves involved in this kind of bloodletting. It's just inconceivable to me that a normal man can see and plan this kind of stuff. I am totally convinced that we are dealing also with some other world entities involved in all of this, and of course that's what the Bible is indicating.
With regard to that,
You would get that right over there. But General Albert Pike was known for having written Morals and Dogmas, and he was a 33rd degree Grand Mason of the Scottish Rite Southern District or whatever it is. But he said, yes, Lucifer is God, and those initiates of the higher degrees should follow the Luciferian doctrine. Oh, by the way, Pike co-founded an organization called the Ku Klux Klan. If there's any brothers in the audience here tonight, they should note that the Prince Hall Lodges was a division that was really set up by the creator of the Ku Klux Klan. His picture and his statue is in Washington, D.C. in public display.
I would like to also comment concerning this Albert Pike. I am not convinced that all Masons are evil. I know far too many of them that are not only good men to start with, but are very loyal Americans and are very concerned about their country and about the circumstances which our great nation and our great republic is faced with. And they, like all other men, have families, they're concerned, and so I don't have any problem with the Masons that I would meet on the street every day, because every man is who he is, and there are many good people. But I'm talking, when I talk about sinister elements, I'm talking about elements which are very high up in the world that the man on the street, the Mason on the street, has no opportunity to be involved with. So there are many good. When I talk about the church, especially the Catholic Church, I can do that because I was born and raised a Catholic. And my great-grandfather was a senator from Florida. My mother had an uncle who worked in the Vatican. So I can talk about the Vatican because I was a part of it. I was born into Catholicism. And when I talk about religion, I'm not complaining about the people. I'm talking about corporate entities, organizations. And so when we talk about Freemasonry, I want to make that clear that not to see Masons in the same eye that we're talking about these Illuminati or the higher-ups. And yes, unfortunately, virtually every religion and organization in the world has some very big corruption at the top, and I can tell you about all of that. And one other thing I'd like to, while I have the mic, about 10, 12 years ago, I had an office in Glendale, and I got a phone call from a FBI agent in San Diego. And he introduced himself, gave me his name, and told me it was not a business call, it was a social. So I said, give me your name. He did, and I said, I'll call you back. So I called the information, got the telephone number for the FBI in San Diego, called them and asked for him, and they put me through to him. So in my mind, I confirmed that he was FBI. And so I said, all right, talk to me. And he said, I just want to let you know that the FBI is aware of who you are, what you're doing. We're aware of what you're saying, and that you don't really have much at this point to fear from your government, because they do not feel that you are important enough or big enough to be concerned with. However, when you talk about religion, especially the Catholic Church, he said, what you're talking about is organized crime at its highest levels. These people are the bottom line on organized crime throughout the world. Mafia, underworld connections, drug trafficking, mafia is directly connected to the Catholic Church and the hierarchy in the church. So when you're talking about them, just beware that your government at this point doesn't consider you to be a threat. But you're going to be stepping on some very serious toes if you continue to talk about religion. That's from an FBI agent in San Diego.
Yeah, I have a question for Walter.
Make a quick comment. The military is rife with Masonic organizations, kind of like the law enforcement in England. If you are a Mason, you go a lot further. And I'd like to make two comments. This is like blind man feeling the elephant, but it's my perspective of the elephant as a blind man. I've never been part of the Masonic business because, very frankly, I never had time. I was always moving around. They say they're not supposed to solicit you, but I was a guest speaker at the shrine in Las Vegas after 9/11. They wanted to know what was going on. And I've received a lot of solicitations saying, Bo, you got to become a part of the shrine. And I've never been a part of it because I didn't have the time, but I've had many, many people in the military that were Masons, and I imagine they had their little cliques. But it was my observation that I have never known, and I agree with you, I've never known any 33rds. I got some books that people wrote, but tons of 32nd degree Masons. They're patriots. I think they might throw away their belt buckle if all of a sudden the Grand Poobah said everybody had to go with the Soviet Union instead of America. They seem to love their country. But I have never known, and blind man feeling the elephant, I've never known a Mason who I would consider to be a good Christian. And for that reason, I could never be a part of the Masonry. As a matter of fact, Bill Cooper said, I have proof Bo was a 33rd degree Mason. I've seen his ring, so I wore this ring just for you. Because it's a Special Forces ring. I only wear it when I go to SF places because it's got my airborne and Ranger and Special Forces and underwater demolitions and all of that stuff in here. There's 12 stones, and there's one in the middle. There's 12 men in an A-team, all of them diamonds. So if you've been wondering, is that the thing? And I even put out 5,000 in gold that I challenged anyone. Get rich, help Cooper get rich. Come and challenge my ring. Let him prove it. But it is interesting. A lot of my buddies, better than blood, were Masons, but I've never known one of them that was a good Christian.
Well, okay, let me go on and answer to that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Are we working now? I just want to follow up with a little humorous situation. I was at one of the expositions, I think it was in Dallas, and Bo was there. And this fellow walked up to my booth. He says, hey, I just shook hands with Bo Gritz, and he gave me the Masonic handshake. So I'd never, of course, I knew that didn't mean a thing. To me, I mean, I hear that all the time. And so this is the first chance Bo and I have had to really visit for a long time. So on this trip, I told Bo about that. And Bo, why don't you give him the answer?
Yeah, in teaching fast attack vehicles over in Saudi Arabia, I leaped off of a sand dune that had no ending. And when I crashed, these fast attack vehicles are made by Chinwood. They got Porsche engines and Porsche transmission. A lot of fun. But I broke my finger. And being out there, there's a piece of bone that sticks out right here. I never went to see a doctor or nothing. So it hurts me to bend that finger for a long time. So I just left it straight. So when I would shake hands with you, when you are a Mason, what happens? Then they look you in the eye and say, are you traveling east, brother? So I know a lot of code stuff just because I said, look, I've been traveling east, but I'm not like that. And it's just because that finger got broken, it was a lot easier. It didn't hurt as much if I tried to grip somebody. So there's your Masonic handshake.
I'm going to add that there's 500,000 Masons in the Southern Baptist Convention right now, and that's one reason why the Southern Baptists have degenerated over the last years. So I would agree with Bo that I've never met a Mason that's been a true faithful and a good Christian.
So I have a question.
Well, I have another comment first. Yeah. I respect everything that's been said, and I appreciate everything that's been said. I would only add this, that I feel that I'm a Christian, but I probably have been charged with being unchristian by many people. But that's my view of who I am and what I'm doing. But I have found for myself that there are good people and bad people in everything, in blacks, Chinese, all over the world. And so therefore, I don't consider that because someone is not a good Christian, I consider the man, the individual. And sometimes some of the finest people in the world may not be of my color or my religion or whatever. So I'm saying that I look to every man as an individual, and if he's a good man, a trustworthy man, because he doesn't share my particular political beliefs or whatever, I have the highest of respect for. So I don't feel that a person has to be a good Christian to be a good man. I feel that everyone should judge each other on the morals and the values of the individual. And so that's my view.
Go ahead.
this
Let's
question-
go ahead and get to the next question.
Yes, this question is for Walt. There's a paradigm shift going on
Like
right
Yeah.
now.
Actually, let's go ahead and get to the next question. If anybody has a question, please go ahead and go to the microphone, please. Go ahead.
Yes, as I was saying, right now we're going through a paradigm shift, meaning that a lot of people are stepping in the virtual realm, the virtual world these days. And I'd like to know and ask, how long has that been going on, and also how long is that going to be kept? You say, some people say the biggest secrets are kept by some of the people in the public. It does seem that way. Some of the people in the public are keeping it secret because they're afraid of what might be done to them because of the technology. It's, if you're a regular person, you wouldn't be able to see people stepping in that realm unless you're aware of it or wearing certain eyewear or whatever, so forth. In that, how long do you think that's going to last, and how long has that been going on? When is more people going to find out about that realm, that whole new world out there that everyone else is discovering, and all the technology that you're actually using that other people cannot see, and that they're using against other people?
I think we're finding out about it right now. If the temperature in a room is too warm or too cold, you notice it. If it's the right temperature.
Excuse me, what they're writing books about these days called becoming virtual. You know, there's books being written about this technology. These people think that no one doesn't know about it when you can just pick up a book and read this information?
Yeah. Well, it's like the temperature of the room. If you don't notice it, you can't change it. You're at the effect of it. And if it's too hot or too cold, you get up and you change it. And I think that the nature of the information age, and virtual reality is part of that, is that you notice everything. And there are no secrets. There's no propriety. There's no ownership of intellectual property. All kinds of things are going to be changing as this information travels at the speed of light. There is no secrecy. It's everywhere at once. And I think this is a great awakening.
Thank you.
I started my spiritual path as a teenager, and since then I've started to wake up, and it's been really, really painful. And I have a question for you, Jordan, that we have about 100 people in Tucson that are have studied your work and many others, and we're about to the point where we're just going right for the assets. What is your experience with the involuntary bankruptcy, and what kind of numbers do you think it will take to make a difference, or will that never make a difference, and do we just need to realize that it's time to change our consciousness and not even approach that?
Well, you're talking about economics, personal economics and bankruptcy. Is that the question exactly?
Well, yeah. We found that carrying through the process, the commercial lien process was having some success, but now we're even bypassing that. And we're realizing that we used to think we were patriots, but really we're sovereign, which means that we don't have any rights. We are empowered only by what we claim and what we create. And we've actually created treaties with the government. You know, we've all filed our secured party claims, you know, titled our names, and you know, my family are bankers, and I didn't understand what they were until recently, you know. But is that going to make a difference, or is it time to realize that Nibiru is coming and we just need to get right, you know, and change our consciousness?
I think that one needs to understand how banking and government operate together, and how we are actually maritime admiralty products. We are a product, and you need to understand the Uniform Commercial Code. And once, and I do a whole routine like a comedian. I do a whole routine on all the symbolism in government and courts. I mean, why do judges wear black robes, and you know, why do you have to go to court to start with? You play basketball and tennis on a court. The whole idea is put the ball back in the other guy's court. And so once you understand how the whole system works, the bottom line is, after you've heard everything, is that there is two of you. There is the one that God and your mother created, and then there's the corporate you, the one that operates in the world of business. And what you need to understand is that as long as your ownership of your name is in the hands of government, they own you. So you need to understand the Uniform Commercial Code, and the book I have, Cracking the Code, is a good start. It's not the last word, but it's a great start for those who do not understand how they have been bought and sold by banks throughout the world. And so I think that there might very well be an awakening, and it's on a very small level with what I'm doing. It's a very small level with a lot of people around the country, but it's growing. Everyone seems to be, everywhere I go, seems to be talking about finally how the banks operate, how the government's operating. What is your straw man name, the all capital letters name? That's a fascinating subject, and so I think that something may be changing now in this country, and I think that's where we need to, one of the main places we need to concentrate on is how banks and governments really, in fact, work.
Well, we've studied your work very extensively, and we have study groups every day of the week.
Yeah.
And we have, we're waiting for your update right now.
Well, I've got a book that's an update.
Yeah, okay, good.
I'm going to take advantage of that. It's called Cracking the Code. You need to get it because it's a good primer on the whole subject of how banks buy you, how your body is security for debt and how they own you. It's an interesting story. It's not the whole story. It's a good primer to begin with.
It's my experience traveling last year for 10 months that there's a real interest in this around the country.
Well, then I got a suggestion for you. Why don't you invite me to come over and speak?
When will you come to Tucson?
Love to.
Come
We'll
right
talk
away.
to you about it.
Oh, good. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with each of you. I've read most of your books, know several of you, and I'm very honored to just be here with you. Thank you so much.
And I thank you for that.
Next. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wonder if you could address the main benefactors of 9/11, such as the Pentagon, who just got their budget increased by $50 billion instantaneously, the Carlyle Group, and Unocal, different companies like that, and the banks that have made money off this, and the military-industrial complex. Seems like we're all waltzing around, talking about things that have happened way in the past, but why don't we bring it current, such as the hit on the Pentagon. There's a lot of speculation out there that it was a cruise missile that hit the Pentagon.
Politically,
What's that?
politically, the number one benefiter in the country would have to be Osama bin Bush.
Well, yeah, but let's take it that Bush and those guys are just pawns. They're being manipulated by money. That'd be the banks, and such as Carlyle Group and Bush. Well, Bush is part of the Carlyle Group, but he's just a pawn. Bush Sr. and Bush Jr.
Well, it's the banksters and the
Well,
international,
the banksters, but why don't
the
we-
banksters and international gangsters.
Why don't we
It
put-
is the Illuminati.
yeah, why don't we put names on them? Such as
I-
Afghanistan.
I-
It was Enron that was pushing for the pipeline to go across, and they couldn't get it through, so they had to use the military to, claim the territory.
You can take a look at the membership list of the Brotherhood of Death, the Skull and Bones, the Trilats, take a look at the Class A stockholders of the privately owned Federal Reserve, and you'll find out who's running the show.
Two of those men are Frank C. Carlucci, who is one of the heads of the Carlyle Group.
Who is
He is a-
roommates with Rumsfeld.
He is a Knight of Malta.
What about-
He is subject to the Archbishop of New York. One of the other men is George J. Tenet, who is also a Knight of Malta, head of the CIA. So we can trace the Knights of Malta as two of the most powerful individuals there that would be then subject to the Pope, which has now caused his papal crusade in the Middle East.
Yeah. Well, it's good to talk
Ladies
about
and gentlemen, we're hearing fireworks in
I
the
think we're
background.
under
Nothing to be
attack.
alarmed about. You're hearing fireworks there.
The tanks are
Well,
coming up around the building, folks. Run through the exit.
Yeah, if you look at 9/11, the result was the flattening of Afghanistan, and also the justification for Israel to take on the, quote, terrorists that are Palestinians. And the Pentagon got $50 billion immediately. Carlyle Group Madoff, when they sold stock shortly after 9/11, they went public, and their stock sold at a high rate. And then just recently, the Crusader project that they were pushing through just got canned by Rumsfeld. But in the meantime, Carlyle did make quite a profit off their stock.
Carlucci runs Sears World out of Zurich. Eric von Marbod, my boss, is down there after he had to resign in disgrace, along with General Dick Secord. They put Ed Wilson in prison. Said they had a secret combination going on, and they sell arms to the world. Carlucci, former Secretary of Defense, former Deputy Director of Central Intelligence. So they're still doing in the civilian world what they did in the government world. Only now they get a chance to stir the pot, not as bureaucrats, but as profiteers. And it's the industrial military complex. You go back and again look at these secret organizations that have existed. America's young, and the youngest really of the great nations. And so these secret organizations have been going an awful long time. And when we talk about trilaterals and Council on Foreign Relations, you really got to go to Great Britain because we are the younger sisters. What's the name of it? Eustace, the international, where where Colonel House went over there, and then the British Institute of International Affairs. And so when you look, they look at us like children. We are the colonies. And I think the royals, honestly, still have an awful lot to do with it.
Well, that's fine and dandy. But we're talking about here and now. This 9/11 affected everybody. There's a lot of people suffered, but there's also a lot of people that have directly benefited immediately, and that's happening right now. That pipeline is going to be built across Afghanistan. Yeah, Enron was just a front.
That's Machiavellian. Daddy Bush declared war on drugs. It gives more power. Junior Bush has declared war on terrorism. But something practical that comes to mind, you can take it from me, and time will tell, God knows. But there will not be any Muslims self-destructing in our malls or on our streets unless they are there by the government. That is just not part of the Quran. It's not part of the plan. It's not going to happen unless we've got something that the government sets up to say, see, we told you. So that it's more Machiavelli when you look at it.
The World Trade Center was simply sacrificed for world government. There's no question about it. It's the justification for war. World War
Would you say that also for the Pentagon also was sacrificed?
Absolutely. It's simply the sacrifice for world government, period. We are in World War III.
Well, the radar defense that we had around the White House and the Pentagon was quite extensive. It wasn't archaic. It wasn't the National Guard with some broken down radar and some, a prop job protecting, it was, they had F-16s, they had, adequate radar. Yes, they turned off their transponders. All 4 planes turned off their transponders, but that doesn't take them off the radar screen. That merely takes it off. It says, I'm flight 77, I'm flight 77, I'm going at 30,000 feet. You turn off that transponder, all it does is take the ID card off and the altitude, but the blip stays on.
Well, most America has bought the big banana, my friend.
Yeah, they have. And it keeps going on and on and on. But we would rather talk about, the Luminata and all that, but why don't we talk about what's happening right now?
Well, somebody asked a few minutes ago what the timeline was for the next event or attack. I don't know if we got an answer for that. Are there any predictions, any intelligence on that?
Well, why predict? Why don't we just realize what happened here? The cover-up at the Pentagon is big. The FBI spent all of 3 days of their official investigation there. That's it. In 2 weeks, 10,000 tons of material was removed in 2 weeks.
In addition to money.
They granted the contract to rebuild that Section 1 that was damaged. That contract was let out September 14th. The wrecking ball showed up on the 13th.
Yeah, no question about that.
Well, the question is, why aren't these things being addressed? You know, we're talking about history. We're talking about, you know, the Vatican. We go on and on about the Vatican. You know, that's wonderful. I mean, maybe they are behind it. But right here and now, somebody allowed those jets to enter our airspace.
It was our Central Intelligence Agency. Our intelligence agency was completely behind that. So now the next question we have to ask is, who controls this intelligence agency? Is it just merely the Trilateral Commission? Is it just merely the CFR? No, it's much more than that. It's the Knights of Malta, high-level specific Shriner Freemasons like George H.W. Bush, and then we have to connect that to the papacy. Once we connect it to the papacy through the Knights of Malta, high-level Shriner Freemasons, we connect it to the Jesuit General, because the Jesuit General, Peter Hans Klovenbach, controls the Pope, and has since 1814.
So should we have gone in and attacked Afghanistan?
Absolutely not. Okay. This is a ruse. This is to draw us in there.
The United States has been duped.
That's right. Okay. We have been brought in there to have a war with the Muslim people, not the Muslim leaders, because the international intelligence community, controlled by the Jesuit General, controls
who controls the Christian right then?
The Knights of Malta, the whole new right.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? Does anybody want to go up to the microphone? Do we have people waiting?
I'd like to comment.
Okay. Ted, why don't you go ahead and comment briefly, and then we'll go to the next question.
I'd like to comment that, are we losing sight of the fact that Oklahoma City, the World Trade Center 93, and that 911 is actually a ploy in order to take away many of our constitutional rights and civil liberties? That's what it's all about, as far as I'm concerned. And if you're going to conquer the world, you got to conquer the United States first, because we're the strongest in the world. And in order to conquer us, you can do several things. Number one, you control the food, as Henry Kissinger has said in the past. Take away your constitutional rights, civil liberties. Put the so-called enemy behind bars and control them. Set up the 10 districts that's been set up in this country, so we won't be able to travel from one district to another. And the internment camps. I was talking to the former civilian head of the prison system in the state of Texas in 1997, and he told me that there are 8 prisons in Texas, brand new prisons that have been built, that are manned, but there's no inmates in there. So that's, in my opinion, sure, money's part of it, but the bottom line is another step toward taking over the United States and taking over the world, the Illuminati plan, the golden plan.
Okay, go ahead. You have a question.
Right. I have to say I agree with the good colonel here that I like Ike. I like Ike, and if David Icke ever runs for president, I'll support him all the way. There's a number of things missing here in tonnage and in ideals. The name Larry Silverstein never came up in the last 2 days, and you see he already owned number 7 tower, and he leased number 1 and 2 within a few months right before. He got them insured and everything, and then they fell down, and somehow 1 and 2 fell down, and they missed a bunch of other towers and hit 7 over there, which caught on fire. And of course there was 6,000 gallons of fuel oil in Giuliani's office, but I don't know about that. But then we've got all this gold. I think there was 12 tons of gold that were there that just, I mean, gold doesn't really, maybe melts, you know, maybe you'd find it down at the bottom somewhere. And then there was the 150 million tons of steel and concrete that don't really go anywhere. I mean, where did they go? You know, it took them 7 months to clean up something that was going to take a year or more. And then, you know, was CDI there? Controlled Demolitions Incorporated? Were they, like, there the day before? That's kind of a question. Then you've got the 50,000 people who should have been in the tower who aren't. Yeah. You've got the 1,000 people who should have been on the 4 jetliners, because they usually carry about 250 people. And usually the morning flight is full when you're going transcontinental, but there's only certain people on there, and some of them were investigating some people. And that brings me to the last thing, the documents in the towers. And those, you know, just a simple question.
Okay, so I guess the question is, there are a lot of anomalies regarding the Twin Towers, a lot of anomalies, and everybody is curious about those. We seem to be getting some very specific questions. I think maybe let's cut to the chase with more bigger picture kinds of questions. It's pretty obvious at this point there are lots of anomalies. I don't know if somebody wants to answer those, all of those questions. That would take a long time. Let's try to keep the questions a little bit more specific. But does anybody want to tackle that in a kind of general way?
Well, I will say that the steel that was in the World Trade Center went to Communist China. And that is the last place on the planet Earth that a private investigator could discover where it is and what chemicals caused it to exceed 2,800 degrees Fahrenheit and melt. Because, as you know, fuel oil or Jet A fuel oil burns at 800 degrees Fahrenheit. It did not come down and melt away from a 757 or 767 period. It just didn't happen that way. If you believe that, well, I won't get into that.
Why don't you go ahead and ask a question?
Thank you. I want to thank all of you for being this weekend here. It was just wonderful. And I know everybody is just amazed with all the light that you're bringing into us, all the knowledge. And I want to tell you all that I don't think we're going to win this war, but finding out who is at the top, because I think we are here really into darkness and light. But each one of us has the responsibility to bring our own lights to the world. You see these lights on the ceilings here, each one is a light. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
A couple of things. Just talking with people and their comments, it seems that a lot of us here that are thinkers have a religious background, and that's, I think, is wonderful. We don't all agree as whether we have a religious background or we don't, but I think that general thought, the sense of hope, and my hope is that the light will cause the darkness to be self-seen, and that this is going to continue. The other observation that I have is that my favorite director, Stanley Kubrick, I think probably was a high initiate at one time in his life, but I see in all of his films, including the last one, which caused his death, his revelation of the Illuminati. I mean, is it any more obvious in the last movie, Eyes Wide Shut, which describes 99% of the American people, our eyes are wide shut to the Illuminati, and if you review that movie, at the party scene where there's just streams of lights all over the walls with the pentagrams and all that stuff. And of course, he goes to one of those Satanistic meetings at that house, and they say to him, which was symbolic to what they said to Stanley at some point in his life, what they say to anybody who's an initiate: if you reveal what you see here, it'll be the most dire consequences for you. If you reveal what you see here, it'll be the most dire consequences for your family. Do you understand that? So within 2 days of just the initial viewing of Eyes Wide Shut, just to the crew and whatever, it got out, and he dies of a heart attack, a Washington heart attack. So people are trying to do it, but it also reemphasizes to me how dangerous this can be, and I would appreciate your comments.
There are other films, by the way. The Skulls Part 2, there's a sequel to The Skulls, and another terrific film, if you can find it, Brotherhood of the Bell, came out in 1970 with Glenn Ford. If you can find that one, see that one as well. Very revealing stuff. Brotherhood of the Bell with Glenn Ford. From what I understand from the gentleman in the audience, it's only available through the family of Glenn Ford. There might be some underground copies of it, but remember that title. Very telling motion picture. 32 years ago. 32 years ago. Yes, go ahead. Or does anybody have any comments about the motion picture or the industry or what we're being told?
The film is being bootlegged throughout the country. You can probably pick it up fairly easily. I don't believe Peter Ford is marketing the film. Peter's a friend of mine. It is, well, I don't believe that he's, marketing it to the best of my knowledge.
Okay, there seems to be some debate.
Yeah,
Okay, there seems to be some
that would
debate
a
as to where it's
surprise,
available.
but, at any rate, it's out there, and I did talk to Glenn about it briefly, and another gentleman who is one of the major stars in it, and they really didn't know what the hell it was all about.
The only
In
thing I would
California.
add, if you go on the web, you don't have to put www or .com. Just type in Pentagon plane and watch what comes up. It's an enormous lot of...
What's that again, Jordan?
It's just Pentagon plane. Pentagon airplane. Pentagon plane. And it will, all kinds of websites. One of the most interesting on the first page that comes up is a French website, and I guess it's the European Space Agency satellite zoomed in on the Pentagon, and you've got a beautiful, clean picture of the Pentagon just a moment before the explosion. Another one is the moment at the point of the explosion. And then the next one is after, and they've got those pictures there. There was no airplane. There was no plane.
And the Pentagon is the interior of a pentagram. And if you extended those points out, I think it would be facing, what is it, north?
Yeah, a five-pointed star is a pentagram. If you take the legs off of the five-pointed star, the interior is called a pentagon. The United States Pentagon is laid out in such a way that the one point points to the North Star, and it has a lot to do with the occult significance of the gods of the North, and it has to do with Saturn. That's a whole nother subject. Darth Vader, all this kind of stuff is involved
in the first church of Satan.
In the layout of Washington, D.C. Also, in relation to symbolism in Washington, D.C., just remember we have a United States Senate, and according to the reference books, encyclopedias, the seat of power in the Roman Empire, where Caesar ruled from, in Rome, was referred to as Capitoline Hill. And it was said in the encyclopedias and dictionaries that Caesar each morning would, quote, go up on the hill, end quote. So he was up on the hill, and he would officiate with the Roman Senate. The reason why you have a dome on the Capitol, because the word capital goes back to the concept of money, capitalizing a product, capital, money. And it was said that Caesar, before he could go into the Senate, had to go into the temple of Juno Moneta. And Juno Moneta, he had to sprinkle incense on the altar and talk to the priest before he could be officially in charge of the Senate, quote, up on the hill, end quote. Juno Moneta is where we get the word money from, moneta. So he had to go to the temple with the guys who print the money before you go into the Roman Senate. That entire superstructure in Washington, D.C. is, in my opinion, Catholic and Jesuit. The dome is domos. It goes back to the Latin word domos, which gives us domination, domesticate, Dominican. Consequently, the symbols, the emblems, the layout of Washington, D.C., all is belying and telling us something if you know how to read the symbols.
The Southerners, after the war between the states, called Washington, they called it Rome on the Potomac.
At some point, when we get close to running out of time, I would like each of the speakers to provide one last comment. So the guys filming, if you could give us about a 20-minute mark, and each speaker should just take about 2, 3, or 4 minutes to make one last final comment about what's going on. Jordan is absolutely right, if I may, about the layout of Washington, D.C. I just went there on tour, and he's talked about the fasci symbol on either side of the presidential podium in the House of Representatives. It's not only there, but it's on both sides of the Lincoln Memorial. And if you know about the symbolism and the sign of the fasci, then you'll know who's in charge and what they've got in store for us. He's absolutely right. It's right in front of our faces. This is, you know, it's real.
One other thing I might throw in as a joke, but it's true. The Washington Monument is, of course, an Egyptian obelisk. It's called a Ben, Ben stone. The Washington Monument obelisk is, in point of fact, a representation of the male phallic. and it connects to the female ovaries or the oval office, okay? So consequently, there's a profound sexual symbolism there, the male phallic and the oval office.
I noticed that it's 555 feet high, but they don't just simply pop one of these babies right down there on the ground. They put 10% below the ground. 10% of 555 is 111. Add the 111 to the 555. That's 666.
Anyway, go ahead. You had a question? Next.
Yes. This question is for the Colonel. It's obvious as to who the master criminals that were directly responsible for what happened in September 11th last year. But still, the question remains: who was directly responsible for what happened to the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City?
I think it's a good question. It was the worst thing that had happened at the time in my life. And of course, Tim McVeigh got all of the attention. I wanted very much for it to be no conspiracy. I was in Waco when it happened because I was to be a speaker there on the anniversary after it had happened in '93, and immediately people were calling in that it was Islamic Jihad, and I said, no, it isn't, because there was absolutely nothing. These people do not hate us, friends. They cannot do anything to us until we do something to them. And we hadn't done anything to them at that time to have any kind of response that way. And so I wanted it to be just a nut. When I look at, and let me dig into some intelligence here real quick. Tim McVeigh wanted to be a Special Forces soldier, and I can understand his motivation. They wanted to make me an officer when I enlisted in Special Forces, and I wouldn't do it because I would rather be a Green Beret than I ever would an officer. And later, I became an officer, which I think helped because now my mistress was Special Forces, and I could love her better as a commander and make sure the troops got their piece of it, too. But when you take tests, I had Army psychiatrists assigned to me because I was early on Special Forces, and they were studying men under stress, and usually it was them that got under stress. My detachment, they sent psychiatrists down to the Pentagon to figure out, they give us Rorschach tests. Now, I don't know what really happened because I was just one guy, but we made an agreement that no matter what they showed us, we were going to see bats. And that is what I did. I stuck to my agreement. Everything that the guy showed me, I said, well, that's a bat hanging upside down. This is a bat, fornicating over here on the wall. So no wonder that Tim McVeigh comes in, and they've got all these psychological tests now for what does it take to be a Special Forces candidate. And if you don't see bats, then obviously they're going to rule you out. So the point is that he flunked. Now, one of the things that is very interesting, and I put it in one of the manuals called Spycraft that I offered at the table, an actual part of the Special Forces CIA test. There are no what you call right answers. There's no what you call wrong answers. Every answer is weighted. They want people who are self-reliant, people who are not totally mavericks that may go off on their own. So you've got to be someone who likes to work alone in strange environments. You don't have to have other people around you to support you. And every question, the way you weigh it, then it's given a weight, and you can score. Most people score too low, and so they're just not self-reliant enough. They're ruled out. If you score too high, you come into a special category. These are people that want to be, but just cannot be, because their personalities are a little too warped on the wrong side. But these are the perfect people to make Lee Harvey McVeighs out of. Because I don't have time to go into all this, but I wanted to get along here with it. There is a signature any time that the government is going to do something unofficially, they would hire a guy like me, for example, a good old boy. At one time I was, until Saul on the road to Damascus. And then I hire my own people. I know people, unfortunately, that would have exploded the building if they were ordered to do so by proper authorities in Washington, D.C. Now, I go out and I get people that I've trained, Muammar Gaddafi's crowd. I didn't do that, but I know people that did. And so you get them, because an American's not going to do that. That's the way I'm looking at it. But you always need a diversion, like Oswald was a diversion. They want to be something, but yet they don't have it inside, so you use them as a diversion. So in my inter-special forces brain, I said, well, there is Lee Harvey McVeigh. And then on my outside, I kept saying, no, we can't have a conspiracy on this thing. So I tried every way possible. Now, I was a demolitionist before I became an officer. And we have a sympathetic demolition formula. When a truck bomb goes off, I just knew that something had, because I had one of the 3 contractors was one of my friends. He moved out of America. He blew up the IRS building in Atlanta. They paid him. I'd have done it for free. But he told me. So I'm trying to justify my conclusion. He said, Bo, all 3 of us that inspected Oklahoma City concluded something fast, 24,000 feet per second, like plastic explosive, cut that steel. Because an ammonium nitrate bomb, even supercharged, is only 16,000 feet per second. It moves earth. It bends steel, but it doesn't cut it. So then I'm trying to make this thing in my mind so you don't have this conspiracy. So I said, okay, I know what happened. I know what happened. And I checked it out, and so was it. In the military, in any government entity, you cannot turn in a lot of bullets or a lot of bombs if you break the lot. If you use, for example, C4, let's say, comes in 100-pound lots. If you break that lot, you've got to destroy it. You've got to get rid of it. They won't take it back. So what do you do with it? CIA used to come to show us their latest tricks every year. And, of course, we broke all these lots. I was part of this problem. I commanded my commanders, do not ever throw that stuff away. Well, then what do they do with it? You can't turn it back in. I said, put it in the trunk of your car. Put it in your closet. We may need it one of these days, and we won't have time to requisition it. And so I'll know to go to the trunk of your... So what happens? The ATF was using all this C4 training in car bombs and all this kind of stuff. They can't turn this stuff in. Well, they're supposed to dispose of it. That's what EOD is, the Explosives Ordnance Disposal. But it's too much trouble. So what do? You rat hole it because you may need it again. Well, Special Forces knows better than to rat hole blasting caps with the explosives. Because military explosives, you can shoot it with a machine gun, it won't go off. It takes a special blasting cap for obvious reasons. So I thought, okay, I know what happened. The bomb went off that McVeigh fixed up, and the ATF had rat-holed 1,000 pounds of C4, which I got confirmed from a master blaster that had done the training for them in New Mexico and Oklahoma. And I said, those idiots had the blasting caps, which wouldn't have gone off by sympathetic detonation, but the blasting caps were in the same container, and it did go off. And now you brought the whole building down, and they are just like you. You'd be indirectly charged with murder and terrorism if you had rat-holed explosives there in Oklahoma City, and it would have brought the building down. So I said, I got it now. And that's what I wrote in my chapter on the new book I got. But then, you see the truth. There's always 2 sides of this pancake. I then hazard to go to people who are bureau rats. These people are like urban development people. I mean, stick your finger down your throat that were on the 8th floor and all this. These people, every one of them, told me, Bo, the reason I was saved, these survivors, is because first the building started to shake. Then the windows came in, which means that it wasn't the explosive on the outside that was fired first. It was something on the inside that was fired that was fast enough to cut the steel, which means C4. And then the car bomb exploded, the truck bomb, which blew in the windows and the facade of the building. And that is the truth. So it means that it wasn't just a nut McVeigh that drives up there that was dealing with Elohim City. And you didn't realize this probably, but there was a guy executed on that day from Elohim City that he killed a pawn shop operator because he thought he was Jewish, and he wasn't. Well, they executed him in Oklahoma, Elohim City, which is just on the Arkansas border from Tulsa. They're a bunch of weirdos. A bunch of guys, Strassmeyer, who was a lieutenant, Panzerfaust from Germany came over that they thought was an undercover agent because they caught him going in through a coded lock there in Tulsa to the BATF. And the guys that are responsible for a lot of Aryan Nation type things. McVeigh was seen 3 days before the explosion in a strip bar in Tulsa telling witnesses, the girls, you're going to remember me forever. So he was dealing with these guys. But friends, it takes sophistication to set up a chain of explosives that cut steel. And that is the truth. And then the car bomb went off. And so I had to change my whole chapter to put in the truth. So the fact is, when you come back to it, follow the money. And it was November, the second time that Clinton got elected. And in Little Rock, there was him and Chelsea and his bride. And he says, because he was lower than whale droppings in the polls. He was lower than any president's ever been in history, 25% approval rate. And they said, what did it for you, Mr. President? What turned it around? And Bill Clinton said, quote, what turned it around for us was the Oklahoma City bombing. So you got to follow the money, friends. So unfortunately, I do believe that Tim McVeigh Tim just thought he was doing, like Lee Harvey Oswald. See, he didn't think they're going to kill the president because he was getting sweet on Cuba and in the space race instead of the arms race and all this kind of stuff. And so I think Oswald wanted to do his duty. And then they said, don't worry, we'll take care of you. Remember, he said, I didn't do nothing. I didn't shoot anybody. Well, they did kill Kennedy. And in case of Tim McVeigh, maybe he don't even know. Maybe they say, listen, you drive his truck down there and don't worry, we'll put it out. But they'll find it and then, whoa, terrorism, domestic terrorism. All of a sudden, kaboom, the thing goes up and all those children are dead.
I have to agree with you, Bo, but the testimony of Jane Graham, who was in the building at the time, said that she felt a movement between north and south, and they said, what is it around the office? And they said, it's an earthquake, and she was just too big and heavy to get underneath the table, so she just sort of sat there, bewildered, at a few minutes after 9. And then she said she heard the explosion come from within the building, and that blew the thing out. Ted and I have done a tape on it called Reichstag 95, and we did the other one called Oklahoma Atrocity, but the building definitely was blown from the inside out. That's why the rebar is pointing outwards rather than inwards.
Some things that I can confirm for you. One, the master blaster in Indianapolis came to me and said he was the chief trainer. He said, Bo, I'd have to deny it if it ever came up like before Congress because I know how you are. He said, but I can confirm that just like you said, the ATF had rat-holed over 1,000 pounds of C4 inside that building. And if the blasting caps were there, it means it was available to be distributed and to be used, but it means there's a conspiracy. There's more than just McVeigh behind this.
Absolutely. There's no question that the building was blown from the inside out, and the unexploded bombs were carted away, and the same individual who was assigned to take care of the debris from the Oklahoma building was assigned to take care of the debris at the World Trade Center.
Bo, what's the possibility of you running for president sometime soon so you can be able to stop these supervillains from continuing to do what they've been doing?
I'm running my dog Hartzell for president in the next election. He's a lot better than anybody I've seen run for office in a long time.
I'd like to see you run for president. And are you going to show up in Omaha and Honolulu?
Well, I don't know anything about Omaha and Honolulu, but having your mouth tied around the exhaust pipe of a bus and being drug all over the United States, that's running for president. Once you do that once, you ought to be sane enough, to figure out that's not habit forming. And so don't look for me to be, I run from the government most of the time. But I appreciate it. And it doesn't make any difference. We are going to win this thing. In the end, we got to remember that.
Well, nevertheless, I think you make a wonderful leader, Bo.
Thank you. On that note, we do need to go to the individual comments by the speakers. If there is time left over, we'll throw in a couple more questions. But I want to give each speaker a chance to wind up their thoughts on all of this. Final comments, predictions for the future, and solutions that will further help us empower ourselves. And I certainly would like to hope that getting together like this is a good first step. But final comments, and please, if you have contact information, phone numbers, websites, things of that nature, feel free to share that with the audience. I'm going to go ahead and start, Anthony, with you, and we'll move down the line. Final comments, please.
First of all, I envision a war against Islam, of course. But the war primarily is directed against you, the people of the United States. Once they have the domestic CIA, and they're proposing that right now, once the transfer is made of power from the people to the president and the police, as it is being done now, once the communist Chinese lob a big one over and incinerate those people living in Los Angeles and maybe other cities in this country, they will call for the complete Nazization and Hitlerization of this nation. Will there be a war between Pakistan and India? I envision that. Now, the reason for the attack upon the United States by communist China would be for the acceptance of the people to retaliate and annihilate the 1,200,000,000+ people who live over there. I don't believe that there is any way that they're going to let the people in China live. I believe this is simply being set up just as Pearl Harbor was set up. I did a book with Colonel Curtis B. Dowell called The Warlords of Washington. And I think we have to take a very close look at the warlords and the Wall Street and Washington at this particular time. Definitely a Pakistani-Indian war to eliminate the population there. Blacks and browns with AIDS and bacteriological, biological warfare. They're considered to be useless eaters by the oligarchy of evil. If you can envision your worst nightmare, if you just all but dream your worst nightmare, and let that dream come true, where there is no freedom, there is no choice, and there is no chance, that is the future. I think Orwell described the future as a hobnailed boot stomping in the face of America. We can win it, and we can turn it around. But we really must incite a revelation if we are to avoid this revolution. Trust in God, but act as today were your last, and tomorrow, and the tomorrow after that. Engage in this fight. Engage in this war. Get the big picture. I look at Randolph. He asked me, right, this black gentleman right here. He was asking me about the big picture. What will put it together? Jordan and I were on a tape called Millennium. It's now all across the world. Bo's tape, The Heroin Highway, has done much to shatter and shock the people in the United States of America. My good friend, Ted Gunderson, has always been there, whether it's at Area 51 with Norio Hayakawa, and God bless Norio. He's done so much for so long and put so much information into this fight. Doing it alone. Leading the people out there for the annual 666 rally. And Jordan with Illuminati 911. And on so many tapes. So often. And my good friend sitting next to me, the greatest individual researcher in the world, Eustace Mullins. I thank you for being here. God bless. Good night.
Well, in deference to Tony, I have to offer a note of optimism to his Orwellism. And what I find as a historian over the past 60 years is the incredible incompetence and ignorance of the elites. And when you look that we went from President Franklin Delano Roosevelt to President Bill Clinton, you wonder how much do we have to fear from these people? Now, almost everybody in this room knows how to do some things and many things well, but our elites do not know how to do anything well. And if they can't screw it up, it can't be screwed up. So I think that is the most optimistic thing I have to offer you, and I think that's what we have to look forward to.
Thanks. Walter?
Thinking of bankers, James Angleton was planning on wiping out the Muslims back in the 70s when I was working on Operation Mind Control. He went on and on about it. And one of the big reasons to wipe out the Muslim is they don't believe in interest. And how can you bring them into the world, into our world, if somebody doesn't do business the way we do business? So not only is the oil pipeline a good motivation to blow up on bomb along GPS lines, along weird mountaintop routes, you know, but just getting rid of them extraneous Muslims who don't charge interest and reforming the opinions of those that do. So you expect to see a new Muslim sect that does charge interest, and I think that's probably based in Saudi Arabia. You learn in linguistics a phrase that you can apply to your own life. The meaning of your communication is the response you get, and if you're not getting the response you want, change your behavior. Keep changing, keep trying a new response until you get the response you want. Well, if you think of the World Trade Center as a form of communication, look at the response that was gotten. Fear, mice is meese, whatever, small, fearful reactions. But now now it looks like there's a shadow of a giant looming over our shoulder. Those moose, whatever meese, got together and they are waking up. So the response to that communication may be the absolute worst response that was ever thought of. So they're going to have to change their communication again. Let's see what comes next. I don't think it's going to stop. I think we're in a process of trial and error from the side of whatever insidious plot is motivating the powers that be, probably the banking powers that be. Thanks for coming. I've met a lot of old friends and made a lot of new friends, and it's been great to meet you all, and I hope to see you again in the near future.
Thanks, Walter. Jordan?
I had a gentleman down in Los Angeles struck my attention by saying that no matter how comfortable you might be in your private life, maybe you have a very good job, people that have money and protection and security, but everybody seems to know that there's something wrong, period. And everybody seems to, as Bo said, grabbing the different parts of the elephant, but everybody, even if they're comfortable, even if they have money and security, they know there's something going on here, and it's very big, and nobody wants to deal with it. I myself totally believe in the goodness of the universe and in God. I am not an atheist. I am not antagonistic toward religion. I have the highest respect for the spiritual presence in the universe, and I want everyone to understand that. I am not ever attacking individuals, but I am a realist, and too many of the people who are leading in the religious community themselves need to be looked at and who they are, and we now know that that's true. But I wanted to say that I really feel that there is a divine presence in the universe that quite simply dictates that what goes around comes around. And there will come a time when people who have planned the demise and the hurt of other people are going to pay for it. There's no way around it. Caesars have fallen. As Gandhi once said, think about all of the great tyrants in history and what has happened to them. They've all gone. Their names live on in history as evil, corrupt people who murdered and caused tragedy. Their names are no good because of what they did. I believe that there is a divine presence in heaven that people call God, that men have called God. I don't know what it is, but I do know what it does. You know, the Apostle Paul said you can tell much about God by the things he created. And if we are the image and likeness of God, there's a lot of goodness in the divine presence in heaven. And somewhere, sometime, that divine presence is going to move. And when it does, what goes around comes around. So I would suggest that each one of you, and I'm not the shining light of faith and morality, but I would suggest each one of us talk to our Father and our Creator and ask for protection to open our minds and protect us. Because ultimately I think that's where our salvation is going to come from a higher source. And keep ourselves organized and clean and thinking, and do the best you can and wait for our spiritual protection. And all the time, keeping your mind open, because remember, your brain is like a parachute. It doesn't work if it's not open. Always be listening, learning, and educating, because that's the best way to get rid of darkness, is throw light on it. And I want to thank you for allowing me to be here.
Thank you, Jordan.
I think if there is going to be a follow-up to 9/11, it will be triggered by some act of violence against a Islamic country like Iraq. If we go back in there and we do the same thing that we did, I think that that is the move that the Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Ladens are waiting for. I do think they have access to SATMs and maybe biological, chemical, catastrophic weapons, and I think they would be justification for them to use it. And once that cat's out of the bag, then it is basically general war, and it would be a major jihad. I think that we are headed toward globalism. It sends a shudder up me as an officer of this government, a constitutionalist, when you hear the Vice President and other people of authority say we need a domestic intelligence agency. That is the last thing that we need. The secret police, the KGB, the Gestapo. At least the Gestapo used to knock on the door before that they would enter. They don't even knock anymore. We just have to do all that we can to try, do not have a domestic intelligence agency in America that snoops all over. That would be a new KGB. That is horrible. Yet I think that that's what government would do. They want to usurp the powers. I believe that that we need to be aware. We need to open our eyes. Heads out of rectal defilade, please. You guys are becoming aware. We need to not only just be aware, but be prepared individually. Do not depend upon government to prepare us. I think that we need to realize that this whole business is about us, that there is an evil who would steal our birthright, and that this is a big test. It really is. I think that we should not narrow ourselves. I think that we should expand ourselves. Fear will narrow us. I think it's a crime. It's child abuse to teach your children to be afraid of everything, when you should be teaching your children to respect everything, but fear nothing. And I don't think that we should be stampeded by rabbits. For crying out loud, there's got to be something more than contrails to worry you. If that's all you got to worry about, then you need to get a life. To be driving around with a vehicle without a tag. If you want a life, you'll get one. If I was a cop, I'd stop you. And all this right to travel, you could tell it to the judge. You're going to get a ticket. And so I have a tag on the back of my vehicle. If I was free French and the Nazis were to stop me and say, let me see your papers, I would have been stupid to have said, well, I'm Marquis. I'm against you guys. Because they'd line me up and probably shoot me, rightfully so. Consider yourself being in an occupied America, if you will. And you cannot die for this country. You will live for this country. And that's an order, not just for me. And it's a lot harder to do. but realize that we are going to win this thing. We do win this thing. Read the book from the back and take great pleasure that you are so important that the angels consider you their champions when you do choose the right, and when you do stand up and not act like a dying cockroach. And this is our government. And if we lose it, then we deserve to be treated like sheeple. And be like that little black sheep that says, excuse me, and moving away. Because usually you end up eating a lot of dirt and the grazing is all hell. Go your own direction. And then keep faith in Almighty God. You are His son. You are His daughter. I don't care what my Islamic friends say that I'm blasphemous. It is the truth. You talk to Him. You don't have to read out of a book for your prayers. He does hear you. Look at Randy Weaver. That was a miracle. And I could name a dozen others. And you got as much right to Him with a red phone as these guys like Jimmy Swaggart. And, well, yeah, they always claim they're talking to God, so I think you got as much right, you know, as Falwell and all the rest of these good brothers. Use it. If you do not use it, I think God's angels are sufficient for all. How many of you have laid your hands upon a child and given a father's blessing? Could Jacob give a blessing to his children? Israel, did he give a blessing? Did it take power? Does God empower you if you are a patriarch or if you're a mother to have power? Do you ever call on Him? Do you give your children blessings that a hedge may be put up around them against the evil in this world, against disease, against the damn chemtrails if they're up there? Let Him handle a lot of this stuff that you can't. And you get on with your life with the idea that one of these days you're going to have to report. And I want you to have a whole bunch to say. Boy, what a trip. Is there any chance I could make it again somewhere? You know, don't you hide your talent. And I know something. This is a soldier's religion, but I know it to be true. We knew each other one time. If God knew Jeremiah before he was in the womb, He knew you. And if He knew you, we knew each other. And one of these days, the scales are going to fall from our eyes, and we're going to recognize each other. That's why I always put, forever your brother, whether you want me or not. I am, and someday you'll recognize me, and someday I'll know you. And we all belong to one great family if we don't cut ourselves off. So God bless each and every one of you. It's been a real thrill, and I'm going to miss these kind of things.
Thank you, Colonel Greitz.
That's a tough act to follow, isn't it? Bo is a great guy. Everybody up here is great. I'm so proud to be up here with them. I'm really flattered because I know we have some real Americans here. Brian, thank you for inviting me and
thank you,
making
Ted.
me part of this fantastic event. I've given a number of lectures across the country, and I have to say this is rates number one as far as your people are concerned and as far as
Thank you
the
very
reception is
much.
concerned. Just let me say this, that I don't think there's any question about it. I think that people are waking up, and it started with the Jack Kennedy assassination, followed by Bobby's assassination. There were more bullets in the walls in Bobby's assassination than there were in Bobby, and it goes on. Then we had Ruby Ridge, and we had Waco, and more recently we had 93 bombings, and then Oklahoma City, and then we have most recently 9/11, and then we have people like Arlen Specter, the magic bullet theorist, coming out making statements that he expects us to believe. I mean, outright fabrications. It's impossible on the Jack Kennedy assassination for those bullets to have gone 90-degree angles 3 times. But the people are waking up, and I notice it as I travel around the country, and this is great. This is wonderful because that's what we have to do. We have to wake people up. I can say this, that since I got out of the Bureau, FBI, 1979, 23 years ago, and became involved in these issues, that I've done everything I can to wake up my fellow brothers and sisters, and along the way I've lost an awful lot of people that I thought were friends. I mean, they don't even return phone calls anymore, but I don't care. because it's important that we follow the path of truth, that we don't weave to the left or to the right. If you know you're right, and my mother and father taught me this, if it's the truth, you don't have to apologize to anybody. And that's what we have to do. That's what each and every one of us has to do. I have a tremendous amount of research, as you know, if you visited my table. And anybody that bought any of my research, there's no copyright with me. I want you to take it and make copies and get it to your friends. Educate as many people as possible. One of the most common questions I'm asked is, what can I do? I'm a housewife. I'm a businessman. Usually it's housewives. Well, what you can do is get the research, get mine and everybody else's up here and whatever else you can find, and pass it on to your friends. Get the videotapes. People are lazy today because they don't like to read. They'd rather watch the videotapes. But if that's what it takes, get the videotapes and make copies and get them out to your friends. And then I think that most important thing, other than trying to educate each other and research and tell your neighbor, most important thing is that we have a mission to save our own souls and save the souls of all of us around us. So that's got to be one of the highlights of this whole campaign, to expose this evil element that's casting its shadow across our great nation. And so as we go forward from here, folks, don't apologize to anybody. Just do your thing and talk to your brother and sister and say, hey, come on, let's go. We've got to save your soul too. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Ted.
Well, anyway, I really enjoyed this conference, and I'm actually I'm nobody. Anyway, the main thing is that when we go to these conferences, many people look towards individuals or personalities, but we have to be focused on the message. For each of us don't know the whole thing. Nobody knows the whole thing. We all know in parts, and best thing is, of course, to for you as an individual to do your own research and don't look towards a personality. But we're living in a most exciting period of time in history. In 1999, towards just before the year 2000, there was a great hype about the coming catastrophes and so on, but nothing happened, and a lot of people are still asleep right now. But we all have to be ready anytime. I mean, things could happen anytime. In fact, before 1999, the Bilderberger, I understand, had a target date of the year 2000, but then that was in 1998 or 1999, they said that they have moved the calendar a target date of year of 2002. So who knows? But one thing is that we got to be ready all the time. But this doesn't mean that we have to just quit our jobs and go, hide in the mountains. That's not what we have to do. We have to stay put, and we have to do our best, continue to labor, continue to witness, and make sure that we have discernment in these perilous times we're living. And the only discernment we should get is from the Spirit of God. And anyway, I really believe that we should not have any fear. We should not live in fear. We should not live in paranoia, but we should have a complete trust and work to the very last day. That's our commandment from God, that we should labor continuously and witness until the day comes. But anyway, I appreciate this conference. This is one of the best conferences I've ever been. In fact, this is the best conference.
Thank you, Norio. Thank you very much.
Well, I would like to thank you for having me, and thank you, Brian. This is my first appearance since I've written the book, and it's a little bit different for me to do some public speaking, but thank you for your patience. I believe that what is going to happen is that we're going to have an attack on Iraq that will result in an attack in America. I believe we probably may very well see a low-level nuclear detonation somewhere, as what has been referred to in the local Newsweek, this week's Newsweek under Bush. And then that will result in a major war for us in Central Asia and the Middle East, where many millions of Americans, I believe, will be sent there to fight a terrible war. I also believe that there's a very strong possibility with the destruction of Mecca and Medina, which could be a response to a low-level nuclear detonation here, that will most assuredly incite a jihad here. And that will be an attack against what the Council of Trent calls the heretic and liberal American people. We are considered heretics if we believe the Bible is the final authority of faith and practice. And if we're Roman Catholic and we believe in freedom of conscience, we're considered liberals. And that's the very principle Hitler's Nazi SS used to kill in excess of 2,500 Catholic priests in Germany because they were considered liberals and opposed the Nazi Third Reich. In looking back in history, there's one tremendous example of a people that was rescued and delivered from their destruction. And that people is the English. They had, many of them had been repented of their sin. They had believed the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ through the preaching of men like William Tyndale and others. And England had began to embrace the true gospel out of which we got our great, grand, and glorious authorized King James Version of 1611, the foundation for our Constitution. In 1588, the Jesuits set out with about 200 Spanish galleons to attack, invade England, and to destroy all those Protestant people. There was around 20,000 soldiers on those ships, urged on by the Jesuits. As a result, the Lord intervened when those English people went into prayer and sent a tremendous storm and destroyed that Spanish armada. The same thing could happen for us. If we truly turn to the Son of God, believe on Him that He died for our sins, was buried and rose again and is coming back, and we pray to Him individually, He would intervene for us. He could sink a whole Chinese armada if He wanted to in answer to our prayers. So the real question is, with regard to God and ourselves, is what have you done with my son? Have you believed on Him? Have you received Him as your personal Savior? That's the question. So I thank you for having me. I thank you for being with these gentlemen. I learned much from them, and hopefully I'll see them again. And may the Lord bless you.
Thank you very much, Eric. If I may be allowed to just take a moment and make a comment myself, I am extremely moved by the words that have been spoken by every single gentleman that I've invited here to speak. I'm honored that you all accepted to come. I thank you for what you've said about this conference and our efforts, about me personally. I feel equally the same about each and every one of you. I also feel the same way about everybody who came to this conference. It could not have happened without you. An enormous amount of personal and financial energy went into this, and you've helped to make it possible. And you're here listening to these guys. You're empowering yourselves just by being here. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, from the essence of my being. I am very moved, and I'm starting to lose the words here. Thank you very much for coming this weekend. We are out of time. If you could please stand up and give each and every one of these gentlemen a round of applause, a roaring round of applause.